Back to the key metrics chart, I'd like to look at protocol revenue in a bit more detail and have you kind of break that down and talk us through your approach to managing the protocol's reserves.
A lot of the way that lending, generalized sort of overclassified lending protocols work is that they will take a portion of the interest paid by borrowers, and rather than hand that back to lenders, they'll keep that within the protocol. Now, the primary purpose of these so-called reserves is to actually backstop the protocol's lenders. From time to time, some people will end up in a position where they can't repay their debts, and that leads to something called bad debt on a protocol. And if bad debt spreads too widely, then lenders get nervous that they might be left holding a kind of a bag of bad debt at the end when they want to withdraw. So they then withdraw, and then that leads to a kind of spiraling where lenders are kind of front running one another to withdraw, and you end up with a bank run on your hands. So the primary purpose of reserves is actually to be there to grow faster than bad debt accumulates on a protocol. And so on Euler, we think it's really important to generate reserves at the start when the protocol's in its kind of infancy, so that you can then essentially accommodate more lenders on the protocol. If you're a lender wanting to deposit 100 million into Euler today and you see there's no reserves, then that might make you more nervous that you might end up being left with some bad debt to hold in 6 months' time. So the more that you can accumulate reserves, the more a lending protocol can accommodate more lending, and so you get these kind of cycling effects. On Euler, we do a few things differently to compound and RFA with respect to how reserves grow and generally how they work. So the reserves on Euler are perpetually sort of reinvested back into the protocol itself, and so they earn compound interest and grow exponentially over time. Whilst the protocol's in its growing phases as well, we also set a higher reserve factor on Euler, which means that roughly a quarter of the interest paid actually goes back to the protocol and not back to the lenders. Obviously, there's trade-offs there. The more that you give back to lenders, perhaps the more they would come to the protocol. But ultimately, then you have this other problem with lenders being nervous about bank runs and things. So there's definitely a sweet spot that I guess protocols try to hit. Ultimately, there's another mechanism as well on Euler that tops up reserves, which is through liquidations. Because of the aforementioned method we use to set the liquidation bonus, which works through a kind of Dutch auction mechanism, actually we allow the liquidator to repay more of a loan than they actually need to. So if they need to pay $100 worth of USDC, they'll actually end up paying $102 worth of USDC on the loaned asset, and that extra $2 goes back to the protocol reserves. And that's important because it means that when the market's turbulent and liquidations tend to be flying around a lot more, it means that the most volatile assets on the market, which are triggering those liquidations and leading to borrowers being in these sort of awkward positions, those types of assets are actually, their reserves are growing faster than the reserves of more stable assets on the protocol. And ultimately that means that those lenders can actually be more confident about lending in the future. If you're lending something that's volatile, then you should probably be more nervous about in the future being left holding some bad debt. So there's two mechanisms there by which the protocol reserves grow and hopefully grow exponentially so that they can accommodate more lending in the future.